Well, greetings again, Seminary Stewardship Alliance. Executive Director AJ Swoboda here. I hope you're doing really well. It was wonderful to be able to be with all of you a few months ago here in Portland. I'm trusting all of you got home. And if you haven't, give us a call. We'll do what we can to help you find your way back. Otherwise, great to have you here today with our friend, Dr. Marilyn Elliot, who is the Vice President at Asbury Theological Seminary, who oversees community formation at the seminary. And I've had the privilege of getting to know Marilyn over the course of the last few years. And today I want to have a conversation with her about the work going on at Asbury and Asbury Seminary. Good to see you today, Marilyn.
Really glad to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit, if you will, about what you do, kind of what the overview of your work at Asbury Seminary entails.
Okay, at the highest level, I oversee the spiritual life of the entire seminary. But not I alone. But my work is really about the formation side, like what kind of school are we, what kind of people are we forming, what elements are the alive formational elements. So it's very experiential, it's very relational, community bridge building, dealing with all the parts of life with a theological reflection attached to it. So that's what I do.
Tell us a little bit. Certainly, we know just by our own interaction and of sort of observing your work from a distance, you really care about environmental care as a big part of
Yes.
spiritual formation. Talk a little bit about how you see that as being a part of seminary and the seminary formational experience.
Well, it's very hard for me to think theologically without thinking environmentally, because I see the creation as the beginning of the incarnation. I see the creation story as a foundational story for our whole lives. And also because spiritual formation to me, formative spirituality is so human, so alive and experienced, you have to look at environments. And so I'm very interested in the theological reflection and understanding of the environment and the issues surrounding it. Yeah. As well, you must note that I'm a Canadian. Yeah, I have to bring that up. As a Canadian, long before you were thinking about recycling, we were recycling and we were caring about our environment. And
yeah.
So done crazy environmental things to support the environment and teach about the environment. So those two streams come together for me.
Gotcha. Can you give us just a little bit of a snapshot about how Asbury Seminary has integrated environmental stewardship and creation care efforts into teaching and into the actual classroom? Are there courses available? How can students participate? Is there recycling at the seminary? Those sorts of things.
Okay, so I am not sure that there is even one class that deals with environmental issues, creation care exclusively. It is in modules in some classes. More than that, we have been working at it experientially. So we do have recycling everywhere in the school. Any building projects we have, we're trying to go green on them. But a lot of the work on changing how the community thinks is through projects like our garden, our community.
Okay, tell us about that. Tell us a little bit about your garden. When I was out at Asbury just a few months ago, I had the privilege of getting to walk around this garden with you, and you were just walking with joy as you were kind of showing me these different elements. Tell us about the garden and what it entails and the vision behind it.
Okay, so the garden began, we were blessed to get a grant. We had an $18,000 grant, which was basically the foundation to build our basic garden plots. And, a lot of what I've had to do sort of like a mule in a snowstorm, is you just keep standing there and you keep doing it. And when the snowstorm's done, the mule's still there and he just carries on, So it's not glamorous work, but we were able to get this grant, and we then fought for land. And even though we have tons of land here, we had to fight for that land usage. And we used that money then to build plots and to build a basic structure for our garden, the foundational structure. So the first year, by the end of the first year, it looked really pretty. But there had been some shortcuts taken and, some different things that had happened. And so the end of the first year was a great success. We had our opening, and the mayor of our little town came, and Dr. Tennant, and we had a prayer and so on. But most of that was driven by the grant. And then what we did was we were able to get a part-time gardener. So we have a 20-hour-week gardener. And we need 2 full-time gardeners, But we have, besides our 20-hour-week gardener, we have not used any school funds. We haven't had any large grants. We get small grants. The second year was a year of trial and error. We had a lot of people who were trying plots. Some of the plots were wildly successful, some weren't. Our soil was not great. We had to augment the soil. The second year was a lot of experiment. The third year, we almost lost it. We almost lost the garden. The weather was terrible. The whole infrastructure seemed to collapse in on itself. We had this big soup, and we didn't have the right tools, and we rented some backhoes, and it was actually so muddy that the wheels were coming off the backhoes, and it was awful. But in the fall that year, it was either close it down or let's dig in. And a lot of us spent hours and hours that weekend. We were fighting for our garden.
Wow.
But this last year, it's just exploded exponentially. So something happened. We had to get through the chaos somehow. But we had to be more strategic too. So some of the big things that we did, one is we established 2 international gardens, because we realized that our Africans and our Asians who wanted garden material were not doing good work. They weren't they weren't building their plots. So we put together a collection of plots and called them the African plots, and a collection were the Asian. Wow. We even brought in things like African sweet potatoes. I think we brought them in illegally. I'm not sure. I think you can bring them in your suitcase, but you can't fly them in, mail them in. Anyways, so we planted the kind of stuff that Africans and Asians really wanted, and those plots became communal. Like you have to have community to do this community garden, right? So what happened was these plots began to flourish, and people gathered there. They became gathering places. We also connected with, instead of trying to get gardeners to come out, we tried to get people who had never gardened. And we started to advertise to them. And I think we had over 35 families or groups of people who had never planted a radish in their life. And what we did is we let them pick a plot design. We had a salsa plot and a vegetable garden, like a salad garden plot and a potato plot. And they could pick their design. And we would provide them with the little tiny bedding plant or the seeds, and they just put it in according to the design. And we had huge success in that.
Wow.
Just pick it, it was great because our soil was doing better and so on. And then we had another thing. We partnered with a division here at the school, which is Faith Work and Economics. And we started the Small Business Incubator, where people could start a garden as a business. So we had a lavender garden, and we had corn. I mean, we had some, and some of them grew way beyond the plots we had. It just, this summer, everything took off. We ended up with, we have 3 chicken co-ops going on. We have 4 beehives. We got over 200 pounds of honey this year. Our chickens are doing great. Now they want goats. And so I just quietly, I used to go and try to get permission for every little thing we did. Now I kind of just
do it.
Sneak the goats in.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so imagine for a moment, Marilyn, that you were in an elevator with a seminary president or a dean or an academic who really is wondering about gardens on a seminary campus. What would be the top 2 reasons that you would say doing a garden is actually really important and good work for a seminary?
Okay, so the first thing I would tell him is about a couple who came. We had a Asbury on Us weekend last weekend, and one family came because they had the garden. There were a couple, and this just happened last week. They were a family. They brought 2 young daughters. They were from the military, And in the places that they had been, people did life in the military compounds. So they had gardens, they had all kinds of things going on. And they wanted their kids, they wanted organic food, they wanted their kids to know where food came from. They explicitly said the reason they came to Asbury for our day on us was the garden.
Wow.
So that to me is, we take all our visiting students past the garden, and even people who aren't interested in it beforehand. What it does is it says something about what kind of community we are, that it's not just about books, it's not just about your head, it's about the whole family. We really emphasize that. It's about nutrition. We also alongside have this really good health program. So, it's not uncommon for us to have a student say they've lost 40 pounds. They're working out with a trainer. They're eating food from our garden. It's just phenomenal. Beautiful. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I would talk about is health, is that students who have their heads in the books, are under stress, to go out in the garden and work in the evening and laugh and talk with people from other races or other, men are talking to women, children are there. There's no, all the usual barriers we have of defensiveness. They break down. I think there's more mental health happens in the garden than could happen anywhere. Mm-hmm. Besides the food, what we're doing is we're offering a place of de-stressing. It's the safe room. It's the rubber room for people. And the community development that's happening is wonderful. There are no barriers in the garden between races, gender, children. And there's so much laughter. If you go in there anytime, just laughter. Wow. So for the sake of the ethos, the spirit at the school, for the sake of even who might choose to come, those are two very big reasons I think that a garden is a great idea.
So you've actually, I think you actually told me when we were in the garden that you've actually seen, and this would be of interest to anybody who's thinking about the financial side of the institution, is you've actually seen students who enroll at Asbury because of the garden. So this has affected enrollment. Yes, it has. It has. Wow. And even students who, particularly single students who have never gardened, there's a real movement among the millennial kind of generation that loves things that are earthy, organic. They love to feel not institutional. And a seminary can feel so institutional. And so even students who come and they stand at the edge of the garden, they're not making their decision because the garden is there, but it begins to, it puts it's like an odor. It puts a fragrance over their time here at Asbury that I had one student say, I don't want to garden, but I want to be part of a community that gardens. So, it says something about what kind of people we are. Wow. Okay, quickly, what is the hardest part about doing the garden? Well, we do it without enough money, but that's okay. There's the usual things, like there's the weather and there are disappointments. But probably the hardest thing is, let me think. Hardest thing. I think it's the work. It's very hard labor. Mm-hmm. Don't kid yourself. There's a poet, I forget which one, it's one of the Romantic poets, who said that nature hates a garden. It's true. You are fighting the elements, you're fighting nature, and then you've got the people around you who don't really want you to succeed because the garden's just a nuisance, Yeah. But there's not very many downsides for us with the garden. It's just a thriving little Eden out there. Wow. What would you tell a school that's significantly smaller than Asbury that cannot get funding? How could they start? What would be a creative way that they could begin a conversation or begin the process of getting a garden? So the thing about a garden is you can start small. You do not need, we started quite big because we were able to put in plots and so on. You could start with the dirt beside your townhouses or whatever. You could take a garden that is in the center of your school that has some kind of not precious flowers. Take the flowers out and put herbs in there. And you could use those herbs in your cafeteria and save money on buying herbs. Or you could plant tomatoes. A bushel of tomatoes a week, or a potato section would help your cafeteria. Wow.
I mean, we're using the garden in those ways as well. But I would tell them to start small and get people interested. You have to have ownership.
Yeah.
An interesting thing, AJ, that's happening here, we have this whole community garden, and then a little bit away we have our a single housing, and the singles want to build their own garden, and so they're starting to use the dirt beside, they just want their own thing.
Wow.
They're starting to plant like rows of corn and stuff beside the very beautiful housing that they have.
So cool.
They don't have 10 cents to do it. They're buying seeds, and you can always borrow a rototiller.
Yeah,
so
right.
you don't have to have plots. You could do something very small and start to let it grow.
Very exciting. Marilyn, oh yeah, go for it.
Every garden store, every like Lowe's or people around you will give you all kinds of gardening stuff as the seasons go on. So we get a lot of our stuff for free.
Wow. Okay. Wonderful to know. If there were anybody that wanted to reach out to you, what would be a good way for them to be able to connect with you just to find out more about the gardening process at a seminary?
Sure. Marilyn.elliot@asburyseminary.edu.
2 L's, 2 T's, ELLIOTT at asburyseminary.edu. Very exciting. Marilyn, great work. This is the kind of thing that everyone wins from. And I hope that you continue to find success in this. So thank you for your willingness to share your journey with us today.
Oh, I love talking about it. You can tell, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, grace and peace to you. And thank you, Asbury. You're a wonderful part of the SSA, and we're really thankful to get to serve alongside of you.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. God's grace.